And hello again, everybody. I'm Rick Sanchez, and this is RT America. You know, it's rarely the act. It's always about the cover-up, the lie. Think of Nixon. Think of Vietnam, which is really about both Nixon, a Republican, and Johnson, a Democrat. Vietnam was really about what? It was about the government telling us one thing, but then doing another. We are de-escalating. No. They were escalating. We are not dropping bombs. Yep, they're dropping bombs. We have no troops in Laos. We have no troops in Cambodia. Yep, they had troops in Laos and they had troops in Cambodia. We know that now. Kind of didn't know it then. Finally, though, a lot of those lies, they caught up with us as a people, as a government, as a country. And then all hell broke loose on the streets of America. I present this historical comparison because it could possibly be happening again. Just last week, we reported here on this newscast how our government seems to be fed up with what's going on with the Saudis and with what's going on in Yemen. We reported that there's actually a move afoot to de-escalate and to negotiate a ceasefire to end the horrendously vicious and bloody war that's taking place in Yemen. Ceasefire, de-escalation. Sound familiar? Then, let me tell you about this. Something called Operation Yukon Journey. It's a secret operation to escalate the war in Yemen, which we only know about now because it was somehow accidentally posted online inadvertently. These are the Pentagon's plans presented earlier this year to do pretty much at least what sounds like the opposite of what they told us last month that they were hoping to do. Let me tell you a little more about Operation Yukon Journey, as it's called, and why it's important. It seems to raise the specter that even as the Pentagon scales back on classified operations, such as refueling Saudi warplanes, it is not scaling back covert support. For example, the presence of U.S. Special Forces with boots on the ground in Saudi Arabia or Yemen. And that, as one old enough to remember the Vietnam, maybe yourself, maybe not, will always say, does sound familiar. Regardless of intent or justification, this is something we think you, as an American citizen, should know about. I'm Rick Sanchez. This is RT America, and it is time to do news again. I'm going to begin with this secret operation that we're now learning about, which is, once again, codenamed Yukon Journey. It seems to suggest that the U.S. engagement with the Saudis against what is essentially the Iranians, although I've got some guests coming up who may argue with that, is both well orchestrated and very much, it's very much an entrenched mission. In other words, don't expect it to change even if the government says, oh, it's going to change. And maybe that's what we need to be talking about, or at least learning about today. So as hundreds of thousands die and billions of U.S. taxpayer dollars are at play, maybe there is no intention of softening our commitment to this war. Rachel Blevins has this story.
As the worst humanitarian crisis in the world reached new heights in Yemen earlier this year, the United States was pledging its support to Saudi Arabia by launching a new operation in the war. This revelation comes from Department of Defense documents that were apparently published online unintentionally. They detail the existence of Yukon Journey, which is described as a central command operation supporting the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and partner nations in Yemen. Now, while the name of the operation had been released previously, this document provides confirmation that it is occurring in Yemen. Before, the classified endeavor was listed as one of several that were established to combat al-Qaeda and ISIS forces. But now it is becoming clear that the true intent was to continue the United States' unwavering support for Saudi Arabia. So this news becomes even more crucial as the United States publicly claims it will stop refueling Saudi-led coalition aircrafts in Yemen. But the decision appears to be one that was requested by Saudi Arabia. In a statement, the kingdom claimed it is now capable of refueling the aircrafts itself. It does not appear that this change will do anything to prevent the overwhelming number of airstrikes launched by the Saudi-led coalition that target civilian areas. There is also a lot that is still unknown about both Operation Yukon Journey and U.S. involvement on the ground in Yemen. In response to questions about the extent of the classified operation, Central Command refused to give details and instead claimed that, quote, the United States is currently providing limited support to the coalition in the form of logistical assistance, intelligence sharing, best practices, and other advisory support. Congress has yet to specifically authorize military force in Yemen, and right now leaders in the House are being accused of attempting to derail a debate on House Continuing Resolution 138. The legislation would direct the president to remove U.S. armed forces from hostilities in Yemen within 30 days, with the exception of the forces that were authorized in 2001, unless and until a declaration of war or specific authorization for such use has been enacted into law. Now the questions remain. Exactly what kind of support is the U.S. providing to Saudi Arabia through Operation Yukon Journey? Will Americans ever know the full extent of their country's involvement in a war that has impacted millions of innocent civilians? And most importantly, how long will this devastating war continue? In Washington, Rachel Blevins, RT.
Good questions all. We thank you, Rachel. I have two guests on this issue with slightly contrasting points of view. Michael Maloof, and you've seen him here before, is a former Pentagon official. Hadeel Oueis is a writer and journalist who's long covered the Middle East and has also been here spending some time with us. Hadeel, let me start with you. It looks on its face like we're getting two different stories. Because if you listen to the Secretary of Defense just 2 weeks ago, he said, you know, we've got to de-escalate. We're going to even try and see if we can get a ceasefire. And now we're seeing this thing called Yukon Journey, which seems to say we're going to be there for the long haul. Forget about ceasefire. Forget about de-escalation. Can there be two truths?
Actually, the conservatives, the Republican Party now is trying hard to save the strategy on Iran here. They're not trying to help Saudi Arabia here or the coalition on Yemen. Actually, there is a very important point here that the most important foreign policy plan for President Trump is to stop the aggression of Iran. How can President Trump, after 2 years, say that I stopped the aggression of Iran if the Houthis, Iran-backed militias, are still targeting the holiest land for the Muslims, Saudi Arabia, with ballistic missiles? And Saudi Arabia is not only Saudi Arabia, it's home for thousands of workers from all around the world. Some of them are Americans.
So what I'm hearing you say is that, yes, this thing is not going to de-escalate, and there's a good reason for it not to de-escalate. The United States has to be concerned in this, as you described, proxy war, which is not really with Yemen. It's the United States protecting its interests against the big bad Persians, right? That's what you're saying.
Right, but there is another very important point in the war in Yemen. The coalition has something also to do with an enemy for the United States, which is Al-Qaeda. And Al-Qaeda branch in Yemen is the most dangerous Al-Qaeda branch in the whole world. And UAE has launched the biggest and greatest campaign against Al-Qaeda in South Yemen. This is very important also for the Americans to keep it.
Hadeel, if what you're saying is correct, then the situation in Yemen is filled with so many bad characters, so many bad people. We're going to have to be in there at least for another 17 years trying to root them out, especially Iran. Michael Maloof, you to that say what?
I say that the United States is there to, on the ground, to go after Houthi missiles. the Houthis are not going to be shooting at Mecca and Medina. That's considered as, just as holy to the Shia as it is to the Sunnis. They would probably target some other areas such as airports and what have you, and military installations.
So you read the same reports I did, and
Sure.
they do seem to indicate that the real concern for the United States is that somebody's going to fire a missile from Yemen, and it's going to hit some huge or very populated area in Saudi Arabia, and that's going to set the whole thing.
Yeah,
ablaze.
but the targets have been military primarily, but they're not going to be aiming at the population. They see what the devastation has been to their own population with the indiscriminate activities by the Saudis and the UAE in launching against.
Can I ask you an American question? Can I ask you a question as an American?
Sure.
I love my country. I want to just protect my country.
Yeah.
Why does my country, my soldiers, my money constantly have to be over there fighting these wars between these people that God love them, they're wonderful people, I'm glad they're here, but why do I have to pay for all this? Why does my blood have to be shed all
To
the
be
time?
honest, from my point of view and from my read for this administration, they are totally against involving any American troops in anywhere in the Middle East. Look at Syria. They're having more leverage in Syria without sending more American troops. They're counting on the
But
Kurds,
you're saying- but you're
on the
saying-
local
but-
fighters. I don't believe the United States will send troops and will involve troops in Yemen. They're trying to end the war, but they're not letting Iran-backed militia to win.
Vietnam began with special advisors. That's what we've got in both Yemen and in Syria right now. It could easily escalate into something much greater if things were to take off.
Explain to me as an American, not Rick Sanchez, the news guy who's supposed to know all this stuff,
All right.
right? Just Joe Blow American sitting out there. Tell me why I should care and why I should be paying all this money and why I should give you my son to go over there and possibly die.
Well, it has to do with geostrategic interests. The United States is a superpower, and it has strategic interests all over the world. We may not agree with what some of the goals are, but the U.S. has a lot of commitments around the world, and that's what happens. We get into conflicts, and we wind up in wars all of a sudden, and we seem to be backing the side like Saudi Arabia that was actually which actually created the jihadi Salafists that went into Syria and are now in 34 countries in all of Africa. So to call them friends is questionable.
So complicated. I'm glad we had you guys here to take us through it. Great conversation.
Thank you.
We appreciate both of you.
Sure.
Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much.
Sure.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.